Welcome to another episode of Mysteries Unknown. In tonight's podcast, I've got Dusty with me, and Dusty's a former police officer who had a really strange encounter one night while he was out researching these creatures. He had a Class A encounter with Bigfoot that he's going to talk about. Had a lot of weird stuff happen that night, but then later on he's going to talk about another encounter he had with one of these creatures while he was out, and he was able to capture it on thermal. What makes this thing so weird is he was able to see something in the right hand that looked like a really sharp object. We're going to talk about all that, and then also he's going to talk about some Dogman encounters that he's documented while he was out in the field. This is a really good episode, guys, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. But before we jump into any of that, I just want to say thank you so much for being here and supporting this podcast. I really could not do this without you guys, and if you've got an encounter you would like to send me, you can send it to me by email at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. But let's jump right into the story. Dusty, welcome to the show.
Hi there, how are you?
Man, I'm doing great. I've had about 4 or 5 cups of coffee, so I am ready to go. I'm always excited to talk to other police officers that have had these type of encounters. So why don't you take us back to Ohio and walk us through your encounter?
Okay. My very first encounter was shortly after I had joined the BFRO. I had earlier been with another group, and that group kind of broke up because the leader of the group ended up getting sickness, and so he couldn't really take part anymore. So we kind of archived that group, and then I was asked to join the BFRO. And while doing one of their expeditions and serving as one of the team leaders at night when we went out on night op, my group had a sighting with a Bigfoot. He started throwing things at us. He was throwing acorns and really small walnuts and things like that. It wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He was just kind of lobbing them. You know, it was more like he was trying to get our attention or see what we would do, that kind of thing. Well, we ended up spotting where he was at. He was behind a tree, peeking out at us, and we had 7 people in the group. 5 of us were able to watch him with a thermal, and he actually wasn't that very far away. We went out the next day while in daylight and measured from the spot where I was sitting to where he was at, and it was about 29 yards where he was at. And we actually found some tracks, which were cast, and so basically that was our experience in that night and sighting him. He appeared to be a juvenile. You know, he wasn't really big, and so and like I said, I think he was just playing with us, that kind of thing. I do think there was others in the vicinity, as we would hear sticks cracking. And it wasn't coming from him. So I think there may have been others that we didn't see. But anyway, that was our experience with the first one. The second one that I had, which actually, believe it or not, was only about a week later. I was with Tom Shea's group, the Northern Kentucky Bigfoot Research Group, down in Kentucky at our usual spot down there in base camp. And we had been sitting around the campfire. We usually build a campfire, and we usually just kind of remain stationary. We don't go out in the woods tromping around and doing wood knocks and that kind of thing. We kind of sit in one spot. We'll build a fire. We'll sit around the fire talking. Sometimes we may cook some bacon, things of that nature, and just kind of get the smell wafting out to where we want them to know we're there. So we don't try to be quiet or sneaky or anything like that. And then we try to encourage them to come up close to us to where we can see them and observe them. And that's what we had been doing that night. I was actually over at the edge of base camp and was just kind of keeping watch. Some others had gone to bed and gone to sleep. There was still a few sitting around the campfire talking and stuff. Well, I got to bed about 2:00 in the morning, and it was getting a little chilly out, so I was going to cover up with my sleeping bag. I wasn't going to get in it. I was just going to lay it over top of me like a blanket. But I was afraid that if I did that, I would then become sleepy and perhaps fall asleep. So I thought, well, I better go ahead and just scan the perimeter one more time. So I started scanning at my right, which would have been about my 3 o'clock position, and scanned around to my 12 o'clock, my 10 o'clock, over around to 9 o'clock. Well, when I got to about my 10 o'clock position, I noticed something that appeared to be sitting out away from me and from the like the chest up, the waist up, that kind of thing. It did have the shape of what usually people describe as looking like a Bigfoot. It kind of looked, it was broad at the chest and the shoulders. It kind of looked like I had a conical head. Uh, but I watched for another half hour. I watched until about 2:30 in the morning, and he didn't move, or it didn't move, I should say. And so I've hollered for Tom Shea, who was sitting over around the campfire talking, and called him over, and he came over and sat down with me. And I said, Tom, I said, there's something out there that kind of like looks like a Bigfoot, but he hasn't moved. And so I said, he's about by 10 o'clock. So Tom starts looking with his thermal, and then Tom spots him also. Well, just about the time that Tom had spotted him, he went from where he hadn't moved. He kind of started this swing, back and forth, and then he got up and started crawling. He crawled from the position where he was at over behind a couple other trees and was hiding behind them. So we were kind of excited. We were talking and stuff. So some other people that was there with our group, they heard us, and so they came over. There was Ben and Rich, who are part of our group, and then John Gregory Drozovich. I didn't say Ben and Rich's last name. That's Ben and Rich Taylor. They came over and started watching also, so they were able to see it. Well, it hit behind those two trees. It crawled up behind, and then after a little while, it crawled over behind a couple other trees, and it stayed behind those trees for a little while, and then finally it came out, and it looked like it had crawled up behind this big tree that was just a little ways out from us, but it looked like a fairly large tree. Now, when you're looking through one of the thermals, it is really difficult to tell how far away something is at night, and that's the way it was in this occasion. It was kind of hard to tell how close it was or how far away it was, and it crawled up behind that last tree, and we watched and watched, and when he crawled up behind the tree, it was probably around 3:30 by this time. uh, then we watched till 4 o'clock, and we didn't never did see him again. Didn't see him move, and I couldn't figure out why he didn't come out from behind that tree, or why we weren't able to see him. Well, the next day when it became daylight, we went out and started looking for tracks and things like that. We found out then, once it became daylight, that the spot that he had been sitting in when I first saw him was that we were actually right on the edge of a creek bed. And the creek bed sometimes has a little bit of water in it, sometimes it's dry. On this occasion, it was mostly dry, and there are several branches off of it. Well, he had been sitting right like up against that creek bank, and there was a stump there that was rotted out, and so he was kind of back. I don't know whether he was sitting, whether he was leaning. He could have even been standing down in that creek bed. I'm not certain, but the reason I could only see half of him was because he was behind that creek bed and behind that rotted stump. So anyway, that's where he come up out of, and then he crawled up behind those trees. And each time he crawled up behind trees, he was getting closer and closer to where we were. We were actually where I was sitting was underneath a canopy that we had set up. And finally, when he gets up to that last tree, the reason that he kind of disappeared behind it and we never saw him again was the one branch of that creek bed actually ran behind that tree. And so, what I think happened, and this is just my hypothesis, is that he never actually crawled up behind the tree. He crawled into that creek bank that was there in that creek bed, and then crawled away without us seeing him. but that creek bed, that branch of it, was right in line with that tree. And so I think that's what happened. He never actually came up behind the tree. He just crawled down into that branch of that creek bed and then crawled out of there to who knows where. Uh, but yeah, we while watching him, uh, you could actually see. Uh, we got uh, we do have a still shot from video that we had taken, and you can see his fingers and toes in it, and he was down in a position. Some people call it looking like they're doing a spider crawl, but this one wasn't doing a spider crawl. He was more like, if you can imagine what a frog or a toad looks like when it's down. His legs in the back were kind of splayed out a little bit. He had two hands out in front of him. One was that would have been his left hand was spread out. His fingers, his palm looked like it was flat on the ground. His fingers were spread out. Where the right hand was clutched in a fist, and actually in that right hand, I don't know what he has in that fist, but it is. You can tell that it's pointed. I can't say that it's sharp, of course, because there's just no way of telling that from a photo. But whatever it was had a point on the end of it. So whether he was using that to dig with or something, I don't know. But he did have whatever it was clutched in that right fist.
These creatures, the way they act sometimes, it just leaves you scratching your head. And there's a lot of questions that I have from that encounter. But going back to your very first encounter that you had, you mentioned that it was juvenile. Did you get a really good detailed look at this thing?
Well, we never did see it out from behind the tree. It was constantly behind the tree the whole time, though we were watching. But we would see it. Sometimes it had its hands kind of wrapped around the tree. Sometimes it would be standing up looking at us. Sometimes it would duck down, where it looked like it got down probably on all fours or something, was peeking around behind the tree. So yeah, we never got a full body view. You could see that it did not have ears on top of its head like a bear. It didn't look like a bear. Um, but like, again, we saw him from about 29 yards, which wasn't that far away, and whatever this creature was throwing these acorns and these walnuts at us. So again, bears usually don't do that. At the end, just as we were getting ready to leave, I had at this spot we were at. Was driving one of those Kawasaki mules, which is kind of like a side by side. It didn't have a top on it, and I assume it was he. I don't know that it was, but something through a rock. It wasn't really large. Um, Trying to think, about half the size of a baseball, maybe. But through this rock, right into the Kawasaki Mule, which we had never gotten into yet. We were just kind of packing up our chairs and stuff and making our way toward that direction. But he threw it right into that thing, and where it hit in there, and it was metallic on the inside, it bouncing around a little bit, so you could hear it, bouncing around in there. But again, bears don't do that either. So, um, there's no doubt in my mind that that's what it was that we saw at that occasion. And actually, that story was written up. We happened to have that night. He wasn't with us right at the time, but he came shortly thereafter. One of the guys on the expedition that was part of another group was a writer for Popular Mechanics, and he actually wrote up a couple stories in Popular Mechanics about his experience on the expedition and doing some Bigfoot research.
That's really cool, man. And these things do change your life, and these kind of encounters and experiences, you're never going to forget them. And I know that was your first Class A encounter, but I know you'd been, going out with these research groups before that. But having that encounter, man, how did that change your life?
Um, yeah, I've always been interested in researching Bigfoot, especially their behavior. What they do, why they do the things they do, that kind of stuff. But I'd say, if anything, it just kind of piqued my interest and made me even more curious. I love to go out and try to find tracks and cast those, other types of what we would consider evidence, such as hairs and things like that. Um, I might also add that I also am the leader organizer of the BFRO expeditions in Ohio, and so we go out on at least two public expeditions every year, usually in May and September. Um, I then also usually have a small group, just it's a private BFRO expedition that I do in June. We're going to do another one this year. That will be in a different location. But the one location that we have that we go to in May and September, we have had a lot of experience there. I think there's been at least three different sightings that we've had. We've recorded things. They almost always come into our base camp at night. They'll come in, they'll mess with coolers, they'll leave handprints and fingerprints on the vehicles and stuff. They're nosy and kind of look around, in those, and we've been able to lift prints. We've been able to photograph them. We had one individual who actually saw them on two occasions in our base camp. We think one of the things that they do is they kind of sit around the first night or so and probably watch us. And then once they learn that we're no harm, that we don't mean them any harm, then they kind of get their courage up and they'll come into base camp and nose around and stuff. Usually it's early in the morning when they do that before it becomes sunlight. But we have probably as much activity at this location in and near base camp as we do when we go out on night ops. There's been several times that we found tracks just outside of base camp within the tree line. We've been able to cast those. On one occasion, we put up a couple canopies side by side, which we call our command post. That's where most of our meetings take place. That's where our speakers speak from. And they have come up near that at night, nosed around in it. On one occasion, they took a brownie that I left there. I accidentally left it. Didn't mean to, and it was still wrapped up in a package. And it took it, or something took it off the table there, and then there was tracks left just outside the corner of the canopy, and so again, we were able to cast those.
Well, it sounds like you definitely have found a hot spot, and that brings up the question. There's a lot to talk about there, and it's such a strange world, man. And once you get into this stuff, it really opens up this thing where you walk away probably with more questions than you do answers. But you brought up something earlier from your first encounter, and you talked about you thought maybe there was other ones out there. I really do think that if you see one, then there's probably another one really close by. Do you think they run in packs? I really don't like using the word family, but I don't know what else to use. But do you think they always are together like that?
I think most of the time there are other ones near, because, yeah, I agree with you. I think whether you call them clans or families, or I think especially the male juveniles do tend to hang around. Um, Many people believe that when these things are born, not every time, but a lot of times they are born in sets of twins. And I think that in those cases, I think if they're males, of course they grow up together, they play together, they experiment together, seek adventures together. And I think that usually where if you see one, there's others that aren't too far away. On that occasion, like I said, as we were seeing this one, we were hearing sticks break and stuff on other sides of us. Now, we didn't see anything, so I can't say for sure that those were Bigfoots, but I believe there was a good chance that they were. So, yeah, I think a lot of times yeah, I think there are others around in the vicinity, whether they're young ones playing together and seeking entertainment, or they do that to kind of protect each other and cover each other's backs. I don't know, but I do think there's others close by.
I agree with you, man. I definitely, I hear a lot of these encounters, and there's always something like that, and I hear people talk about trying to, shoot one of these things. And back in my mind, I'm always thinking, you don't want to do that, because if you take that one down, you might get lucky too. But man, what's going to happen to you after that? Because I guarantee you there's another one out there watching. But the other encounter you had with the thermal, you talked about something in its hand, man. What do you think that thing was? You talked a little bit about that, but if you had to guess, what do you think that was?
My opinion would be that it could have been either a bone that had kind of been sharpened to a point, like a rib bone or a femur or something like that, or it could have just been a stick that had been sharpened to where there was a point on it, and they could have used it to dig. Um, I mean, there's always the possibility that maybe somewhere it had found a knife, whether it be in somebody's trash or who knows what. There's always that possibility. But like I said, I can't say that it was sharp because I obviously didn't see it or touch it or anything. But you can definitely see the points on it. So I think it was using it as some type of tool or utensil for something.
Well, that would make sense, man. And I guess there really is no way to be able to tell unless you physically saw it. But what do you think that thing was doing out there that night, man?
Uh, I think my personal opinion is that we just happened to come to a lucky spot to where he hung out at times. Because after that, we actually started investigating that area a little more. We put out what we call LDRs or long duration recorders in that area. We found a place where it appears that a Bigfoot would travel in and out like a trail and kind of hunker down at times. And we put one of these LDRs or recorders in that area. We were able to get good audio on there over a course of, uh, well, it would have been more than a year that we kept that recorder out there, and we were able to actually program these recorders. I would set it so to come on 9 o'clock at night, go off 7 o'clock in the morning. It ran off of D cells, not triple A's. So it was able to. We were able to keep it out there for about the longest I've ever gotten before is 52 nights. But normally about every month or every 4 weeks, I'd go out and change the batteries and change the SD card in it, and then I'd bring it back and upload the SD card to my laptop and run it through a software program. And so we have good what we would call, I guess, evidence that that there were Bigfoots using that area by the audio that we collected. There was some interaction with our recorder. Also, we found tracks in the area. So I think it was just one of those things where we happened to be at the right place at the right time. And then after having come back there, we were exploring that area and actually changed it out the recorder at one time. And we heard what we felt was a Bigfoot there at the same time. We didn't see him, but we do believe that it was a Bigfoot that we kind of come up on, and then he took off and actually did a rapid wood knock, and then right immediately after there was three rapid wood knocks, almost like in a panic mode type thing. So I think that we just kind of disturbed him or come upon him accidentally in that area at that time when we were changing out the recorder. So I just think that there happened to be one there at that time that he frequented that area. Maybe he knew that other people came there even before us. And so that's just kind of one of the spots that they checked out at night to see if there was anybody there. And they could get some entertainment out of it.
You're probably right, man. It makes you wonder how many times people have been out in the woods and they walk right by, these creatures and they have no idea that they're that close to something that just sits back and watch. Because I mean, that's their world. They live there. They know how to navigate those places and traverse that, and you'll never know they're there. Um, I got to ask you because you're from Ohio and all these encounters are there, but I know you've heard the Ohio howls. Almost everybody has, but is that really similar to what you guys are capturing?
At times, yes. We've also captured other. We've gotten screams. We've gotten like huffs. Um, I'm trying to think what else. Whoops. We frequently get whoops up in this area. I always think that's kind of neat to get those. Uh, and you can usually tell, or at least in my opinion, a difference between, say, a young one, an older one, a male or a female. My experience has been that the females kind of sound more melodic, almost like a song type thing, where the males are sometimes shorter, louder, not quite as pristine as what appears to be a female one. But yeah, we get a lot of whoops up in this area, and so I always think that that's kind of neat. But yeah, we get screams at times, we get grunts at times, we get humps at times. It just depends. I think what depends on what their intention is, whether what they're trying to communicate, if they're trying to scare us off, if they're trying to get somebody else's attention, or maybe what we're hearing isn't even directed at us. It could be directed at somebody else or something. So but yeah, we do get quite a bit of audio, which is neat. I love collecting audio and listening to it and reviewing it on my laptop.
That's pretty neat, man. It's a very interesting world, and it makes you wonder why they do some of the things that they do. And hopefully with this podcast and all the others out there, man, and groups like yours, we can kind of get some answers. But speaking of answers, I like to ask everybody this question, and I mean, because it's one of those things like there is nobody's an expert in this world, man. We just take an educated guesses, I think. But what do you think these things are, man? I would really be interesting to know what you think.
Right now, I tell everybody I kind of lean toward the side of flesh and blood. Um, I do keep an open mind that they could be something else. I know there's a lot of different, like you said, there's a lot of different opinions of different people as to what they are, where they come from, that kind of thing. I'm not saying that at some point I couldn't be swayed a different direction if there was enough evidence to indicate that. As of right now, I'm still leaning towards the flesh and blood. My career before I started becoming a Bigfoot researcher was I was actually an investigator, and I did that for 25 years. And then I moved from being an investigator to what my agency actually called an, the administrator, which meant that I then supervised the investigators. And so I'm very aware of what constitutes evidence, what's good evidence, what's not, what it takes to prove things in court. How much evidence it takes, those kind of things. So I am skeptical. When people say that they've seen this, they've seen that. Of course, I want some type of proof that's the case of what happened. Um, I don't just jump and say that every sound, every time somebody sees something, that it is a Bigfoot. I try to weigh things out and investigate things and determine possibility of whether or not that statement could be fact. Um, but because I think because of my background and stuff, that's part of the reason that I do lean toward flesh and blood. I've heard some very, I guess I would call them just amazing accounts at times of things that people have witnessed. And I've always said that I do keep an open mind. I won't call somebody a liar just because I have not experienced the same thing that they have. That's very possible. Not everybody's experienced the same things I have. But so I do keep an open mind in that respect. And like I said, sometime down the road, it might be possible with enough evidence that I'm swayed in a different direction. But right now, I'm in the camp of flesh and blood, that they are some type of relic hominid, or something of that nature, a branch of the family tree that just hasn't been admitted to by science yet. Maybe someday, you know, maybe someday it'll point us in a different direction. I don't know.
I mean, that's about the best answer you can give. I totally understand that. And first of all, man, thanks for your service. From one former police officer to another, man, I know that world. I'm very familiar with it, investigations, things like that. And, you look for trace evidence. It kind of changes their perspective on the way you look at these things. And, I come from the camp that they're more than flesh and blood. My faith is really important to me, and I look at things through a biblical lens, and I think maybe they're Nephilim, a fallen angel. I'm not really sure exactly where to put them, but somewhere in that world. But man, we're just taking educated guesses, and that's what's so intriguing to me about this. And I learn something every time I talk to somebody new, and I appreciate you sharing that with me. But one of the questions I would want to ask you, being in this world and knowing a lot of people that have had encounters, what would you say to somebody listening to this podcast tonight that maybe just doesn't believe, or they're on the fence about these things?
I would just tell them again, keep an open mind, and don't shut it out just because you haven't had that experience. But at the same time, do be skeptical. As don't believe everything that you read, and everything that you might see in TikTok, or on YouTube, those kind of things. I'm not saying that those aren't true. I've done a lot of podcasts that are on YouTube and things in that nature, and I can tell you with my whole heart, everything that I say is true, at least to my belief. Um, but again, remain skeptical. Do your own research if possible. If you're able to get out and get in the woods and things like that, hook up with somebody who has some experience and knows what they're doing. um, get on things like the BFRO website and find out where there's been reports made. Look at newspaper articles, go to conferences, go to sometimes different ones of us will go to libraries and speak. To go to some of those, and you can kind of create a network of friends and stuff, and find out where there have been experiences, and then go for yourself. You don't have to take somebody's word for it. Go and experience it yourself, and see if whether or not you see things that aren't easily explained. See if you hear things that aren't normal in nature, and then decide for yourself. Based on your own evidence.
That is solid advice, Dusty. That is great advice, and that's exactly what people should be doing. So if you're listening to this podcast tonight and that's you, man, take up his advice, man. It can definitely change your life. And until I saw what I saw, it was really hard for me to believe it. But once you see these things and you know that they're real, man, it really does change you. But this is kind of off topic, but I'm really curious to know, and I've never asked a guest on the show that I brought on, and we were just talking about Bigfoot, but Dogman's one of these terms that have been popping up more and more, and I hear a lot of Dogman encounters now, and it seems like they're coming forward more and more, man. It's really becoming its own thing. But as a Bigfoot researcher and being in that world, what are your thoughts on that, man? Where do you put that in this world?
Man, I tell you what, I don't know what to think about that, because you're right that excuse me, there have been more and more reports lately. I've only heard two stories personally that haven't been on podcasts, of where somebody has seen something that they would describe as being the dog man. One of them was described to me within about 25 miles of my home, 20 miles, something like that, and was supposed to have run across the road in front of a couple, husband and wife, an older couple, and they said that it went about halfway across the road on all fours, and then stood up and finished running the rest of the way off on its hind two legs. The wife then commented that she asked if he had seen that, and she commented that it just like a wolf. And the husband then spoke up and then said that he thought it looked just like a werewolf, and both of them agreed that it looked exactly like the one that's in the movie The American Werewolf in London. That's what they said that it looked like. Now, I took a report just about a year ago. Matter of fact, it'd be a year ago this month. Not all that far from me, maybe about 40 miles, something like that, about an hour's drive. And a gentleman had gone to school to pick up his daughter. She was at choir practice, and it was just starting to become dark. And he was driving down a highway going back to his house. And he said that this thing ran across the road in front of him. His opinion was, and he took me out there, showed me where this place was. He thought that, again, it had run up out of this dry creek bed on one side of the road, had run across the road in front of him into this field, which was on the other side. And he described this creature as being on all fours. It was on all fours the whole time. Said it was very large. It had a he described being a shaggy mane. Said that it had ears that stuck up in the ear like a Doberman Pinscher. It had a snout on it like a German Shepherd. Its body, he said, from the nose to about its butt was about 4 feet long. He said it had about a 4-foot tail, and he had hunted and trapped and stuff his whole life, and so he was a pretty good judge of the size of things. And he said that in his opinion, that the thing weighed probably 400 to 500 pounds. Said it was just super muscular. And he said he couldn't believe how fast it was. And I asked him if it ever looked towards him, and he said no. It just seemed to be intent on getting across the road and getting from one side to the other. And he said after it had run across that road and into the field, that it just traversed that open country so fast and had basically run out of sight into that field. But even today, he won't call it a dog man. He says I really don't know what I saw, but he said I've had dreams about it ever since then. He said it just. He said for a long time he was actually afraid to drive down that road anymore in his car because of this thing that he saw.
I don't blame you, man. I don't blame you one bit. You know, that's one of the main reasons I do not go off into the deep woods alone anymore. Like, you know, with that and then just people, you don't know who's out there, what's out there, man. But these things, man, they keep me up at night, and I really, you know, scratch my head because I think, you know, you could put Dogman in its own category. Bigfoot, you can go back and forth what it is, but I think Dogman's just evil. I think they live off of fear, thrive off of fear, and it's just a strange world. There's a lot of things in God's universe we don't understand, man. But, you know, Dusty, I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to share that with us. And, you know, if something pops up in the future, man, I'd love to have you back on. So keep me in the loop.
Yeah, that'd be great. Anybody wants, if anybody has a question that they want to ask me, yeah, feel free to contact me. They can hit me up on Facebook. I'm the Dusty Roof that's on there. At that time, I had brown hair, and I'm hanging out a red Jeep Wrangler. Or they can send an email. My email address is DustyRuth, DUSTYRUTH, no spaces, the numeral 1 at gmail.com, and I'll certainly respond back to them. But yeah, I'd love to come on again. Like I said, I do lead the BFRO expeditions here in Ohio. We'd love to have anybody who is interested in attending an expedition. All you have to do is get on the BFRO website. It's actually www.bfro.net. Make sure you put .net, not .com, not .org, .net. And there's a way to get on there and see what expeditions there are available, and you can sign up that way. But we'd love to take them on an expedition. And maybe this summer, you know, after we've been out, this next year, in May and September, I'll have some more report if you want me back on.
Oh, that'd be really cool, man. That'd be very cool. I would love that. So keep me in the loop. Let me know. You guys be safe out there. Be really careful. It's a strange world. And again, I appreciate your time and your service, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me and Dusty tonight. Such a great encounter experience, and it's really awesome to be able to sit back here and listen to these encounters and hear firsthand these experiences. I feel really blessed to do that. And if you've got an encounter you've been sitting on or something you want to share, please send me an email at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. I would love to have you on the show. If you have any questions for Dusty, make sure to reach out to him, send him an email. Really great guy. He'll get back with you. But guys, you know what I'm going to say? It is so vital to everything that we do. Stay prayed up. We'll see you in the next episode.